I think it's good if people switch off video, no, Leo?
If their internet is slow, then it will help.
Right. Also, it's a bit distracting if people are often doing very different things and they don't realize they're on video.
If they are dancing, it's okay. So,
Are we ready?
almost ready.
Yeah, we can start.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, good.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the webinar series. Today's is the last in the series, the 10th of the webinars that we've been running. So this is titled The Interdisciplinary Action Research Conversations with Emerging Leaders. So why these conversations is a good question all of you may ask. So in a world where we all got used to the world of masks and physical distancing and work from home, and almost everyone is still adjusting to lockdowns and containment and quarantines, and we've also lost some of our friends in this journey in the last 6 months. Everything about us is demanding a fresh new thinking. So in a world like this, this is the opportunity to rethink the world. And as national and global economies have crashed, the unorganized and informal communities who constitute a majority of the economic population are left uh, horribly impaired. So in this climate of despair, various young researchers and activists have been working on emerging trends in interdisciplinary action research, which addresses some of the most pressing issues of our times, and that too from various sectors, such as urban planning, public health, sociology, ecology, environment, digital commons, migration studies, informal economy, and more. So, such ideas and explorations deserve public focus because these studies have been going on very quietly in the background, and many people have been, sitting in the background very quietly doing this work. And it is at this time that we need to hear their voices. So, given the post pandemic situation and the difficulties to meet and discuss these kind of ideas, the Center for Financial Accountability and Environment Support Group came together to collaborate and bring to focus such various exciting explorations by young researchers and other workers from across India. So, in this webinar series, we have tried to draw attention to such quiet and interdisciplinary efforts by emerging researchers and leaders through in-depth and engaging conversations. In the process, the series has aimed to create spaces for interaction between academia, civil society, students, researchers, and the wider public. So these webinars we've been running over the last few months now. It has been every Thursday between 5 and 6:30, and it has been streamed live on Facebook, and the recording is also available on the ESG website. So for today's topic, in a post-COVID world, the new anxiety is digitization. So many children are already spending too much time engaged with screens. It could be computers, TV screens, smartphones, gaming gadgets, leaving them very little time to see even what's outside their window. Social media, TV shows, personalized music with headphones, school and homework, everything that's happening on computers is kind of hypnotizing children and adults alike. And many studies have reported that addiction to the digital world is causing numerous forms of health problems that include depression, social isolation, lack of physical development, obesity, learning deficits, decreased vitamin D, and so on. So it is in this context, it is becoming increasingly important to include nature-based learning in our education and nature-based unwinding therapies, both for children and adults, to connect with their inner selves. So in this regard, join me today in a conversation on Rewilding Humans, nature education at the Gurukula Botanical Sanctuary, a place where one can connect with the natural world and learn by doing many things as they go. So I will now hand over the forum to Suprabha Session to give us an introduction to the Gurukula Botanical Sanctuary and introduce our speakers. And before that, just a little housekeeping. We will keep our microphones on mute and cell phones on silent. We would welcome questions in the chat box. And if you would like to interact, do raise your hand and we will give an opportunity for you to speak. We have three speakers today. Each speaker will speak for about 10 to 12 minutes. And after all their talks, we will take questions and we will make it interactive and let it be a conversation. Thank you. So over to Suprabha.
Thank you, Bhargavi. Thank you, Bhargavi, Leo, and Joe of Environment Support Group and CFA, Center for Finance and Accountability, to invite Gurukula Botanical Sanctuary for its first ever sharing in not only digitally, but also, I think none of us, we've never had so many people appearing in a public circumstance so far. Although our place is open to the public and thousands of people come, we have the luxury of sharing our world in a very physical and intimate way. And this is a very strange thing to be talking about rewilding humans in this form. For over 45 years, the place, Gurukula Botanical Sanctuary, but also just the whole, the people living in that land base have actually shared in one way or another something about that world with people from all walks of life before it transformed into this rather grand conservation center that it is today. People came just to be quiet, to work on the land, to walk in the forest, to be alone, to be centered with non-humans. And very, very slowly, over a long period of time, has emerged a series of programs and approaches, and it's its own pedagogy now. But that's happened over a very long time. The best way to understand it is to come visit us, and the place is open to the public. And post-COVID, everybody is welcome. Get your short stay permits or your long stay permits, and then you'll be able to come. We're not yet open to educational programs for the coming season, but I'm hoping that very soon we'll be able to open up, because the winter is when we actually open our doors to all kinds of people from all over the world, all over the neighborhood, all over the region, to come for a few minutes or a few hours or a few days or a few months to experience something of this wild world that we have been a privilege to live in. We've had a privilege to live in and be part of. There's lots to read online, so please go ahead and Google Gurukula Botanical Sanctuary when you have time. But for today, I'm very pleased and very proud to be introducing three cherished people who have been very much a part of the residential educational programs. So there's day programs and there's residential education programs. We'll begin with Nikita Rao, who has been for three educational seasons come to learn and to explore education and conservation, and she'll tell you more about herself. Lorenzo Castellari has made his way to South India from the mountains of Ticino for over 30 years and has many, many stories to tell about how he introduces children and young adults to the natural world and the questions that he raises with them. And then I'm really pleased today that Saji Saji Velli, who is a neighbor of or rather Gurukula Botanical Sanctuary is a neighbor of Saji and his peoples. And Saji's been walking lots of young people into the forest and to share his home with them. We've known Saji and his family for a very long time. So this is a real pleasure that he can come. He's being translated today by Shirley Joseph, who is a co-founder of Kanavu, the amazing school for tribal children in Wayanad, and has been part of the GBS community for many, many seasons and decades. She's part of the landscape of Wayanad and part of our lives. So over to them. And I'll be clumsily sharing some pictures while they speak. They don't necessarily coincide with the thing being said, but this is the best that we could do. So over to you guys, Nikita.
Hello. Thanks, Ivy, and hi to everybody who's tuned in to listen to our stories. So I'm Nikita, and I'm going to begin with sharing my story and what's been happening with me and what I was doing before I came to Gurukula Botanical Sanctuary. And oh wait, sorry. Yeah, just my story about before coming to the sanctuary, and then talk about what I've been doing in the sanctuary, and also my sense of conservation and education in this time. So I kind of want to start with moments, and these moments or times in our lives where there's this sudden reshuffling that happens in our heads of ideas and perceptions, and we're struck with something completely new, and for a moment there's a new window to look through. So when I look back on how I got here and into conservation and education, I go back to some of these powerful moments for myself. So I fell in love with dogs early on, beginning with Mocha, our dog at home. And being around him opened up a world of meanings and possibilities of living and functioning. And, something unknown must have, seeded in me at that time, which was that I wanted to I wanted to be around animals, when I grow up. So, and another was the opportunity of living a completely opposite life for a year, from the city of Chennai to a tropical forest in a little coastal town in Brazil. And this was a really crucial year for me. And I was 15 at the time, and I went on a school year, but for me, this was really a life education in so many ways. So these are broadly two moments that I've held on to, and that I feel fuel my way on the path of dogs, and then animals, and then nature, and subsequently conservation now. So I finished school and I went on to college to pursue environmental studies and international relations degree. And I would spend my summers volunteering at different animal and wildlife organizations. And to put it a little short, these were very valuable experiences for me. But when I was done with college, I was just utterly confused, and there seemed to be this great, chasm between what I had learned and what I had experienced, and I didn't quite know how to reconcile the two. I had a lot of questions about work at the time, what it means, and whether it was possible to make a life out of, love for animals. And that's kind of when I stumbled on and, kind of jumped into this 1-year informal course in sustainable living in Bhumi College. And so much just kind of fell away and came together in this time, a lot more grounding and clarity and less abstraction in a way. So the possibility of a more ecologically sensitive way of living and work became very real for me at the time. And we delved deep into topics such as sustainability, ecology, farming, food, waste, economics, and education. What really struck me most was the way that we were learning, the way that I was learning, and in group, in conversation, in practical work. Theory was one part of it, but it was a small one, and this made such a difference to me. And there was a moment where I was like, hey, I would like to do this for and with more people. And so this is kind of basically what got me thinking about conservation and nature education. So post this, I was to go on a forest restoration project in Sarawati. And again, the same kind of chasm opened up, and I again felt like I didn't know enough or understand enough or didn't quite know what to contribute. So I decided to visit more people and places doing this kind of work. And this led me to a friend, collaborator, former student of the sanctuary, um, Basant Bosco of upstream ecology, involved in restoration work in the Nilgiris. So I was just amazed by his work, and I asked him if he knew other places doing this kind of work, and he told me that I should visit the sanctuary. And so I did. And honestly, I was just overwhelmed when I got to the place. Um, I couldn't believe such a place existed, so wild, so diverse and teeming with life, and that this was done by the efforts of a group of people. And sorry. So those 2 days, they completely turned everything I thought I knew about the natural world upside down, how I see it, how I perceive it, how I relate to it. And I remember spending an afternoon with Lali Joseph, one of the heads of conservation gardening, and assisting her while she was repotting her impatiens plants. And she spent nearly an hour on one pot, and she very slowly and gently cleaned the roots of each plant, explaining to me how this plant is both delicate and hardy, but that it was going extinct in the wild, and that they had brought it from a place that was being destroyed. Yeah, so she then carefully arranged the pot with sand and stones and placed each plant, into the pot very thoughtfully. And I was really moved watching her pot this plant. It was kind of one of those moments again. And I was trying to help her, but she pointed out that I was being too hasty. And I thought to myself, hasty. Was that my problem, or was that a problem with how we generally function? And another walk around a small area of the naturally rewilding land, and a conversation with another member of the sanctuary, Suprabha, and who's concerned with the broader issues of rewilding and conservation at a landscape level. So she really challenged my notions of restoration, and she went on to highlight community and habitat and landscape, and how they interact together to create this dynamic being that is the wild. And it got me really questioning my own notions of restoration and rewilding, which was limited to trees, honestly, at the time. And I left thoroughly amazed and confused, and just this strong feeling that I needed to begin again, and that I wanted to return, and I was quite eager to do it fast. But the sanctuary did not take me in immediately. So I came a second time for a longer period, and then a third. They proposed that I come in slowly, feel my way in, so that the place may also have a feel of me too. And this was really new to me, So no CV, no resume, no previous qualifications or interviews, just my time and my patience. And I highlight this because I hadn't ever given much thought to entry or the coming into a place as a shared process. And I was encouraged to find my own way into the sanctuary and relationship with the place, the work, the natural world itself. And this was actually really challenging for me at first, but I think I began to understand it more the third time around. So this time I came into the education program as a part of the group, really, both as a learner and as an assistant. And I was assistant to Lorenzo, who has co-created the educational programs from the very beginning and who will be speaking to you next. So the first group that I came into spent a whole month living at the sanctuary, and we did everything together. We lived together, we cooked together, we bathed the river, we did little jobs around the sanctuary, discussed and exchanged observations about things. So every aspect was given the same quality of attention and importance, and we weren't taught about nature, and we weren't teaching about nature as facilitators either, but learning through participation in the life of the sanctuary, the direct contact with nature and forests being core. And this was a very important distinction for me. And Lori has a very hands-on and truly embodied approach to education. He's always getting us to challenge and stretch our limits. At the same time, he has our gaze kind of focused on the ground, right under our feet through direct experience, but also keeping our eyes on the larger context through dialogue and discussions. It's a very skilled balance. And I realized that the slowness that I was talking about before was about a quality of attention and intimacy that's possible when you slow down. And this is also a very crucial part of the ethos of the education work, and something that I have also tried to carry over to my work in the conservation garden, the kitchen, the dogs. I spent some time with Suma, another head conservation gardener there in the orchidarium. So she had me cleaning algae and fungus off the orchids for a couple of months actually. And she explained to me that while this might seem like simple work, that this was really important work, the direct care of beings and how one can learn so much about them, in this way. So I've been a part of, as Subi mentioned, 3 seasons of the education work now. Still part learner, part facilitator, which others at the sanctuary also continue to stress that there's no real end to learning, for anybody. And one of the visiting kids once called me a caretaker. And so my role has been, to take children in groups to the sanctuary in a more practical and physical sense, to meet different areas of the sanctuary and bring the children slowly into the life of and work of the place. Sorry. So so I'm essentially, I was looking at the pictures. So essentially,
just a sec, you have maybe another couple of minutes.
Oh, okay. Cool. So I've essentially kind of been a point person in the place between the groups and the sanctuary, and I spent a lot of time cooking in the camps as well with Leela Ma, the head of our community kitchen. And so cooking is something I've engaged the kids in, and some of the other areas are the conservation gardens, the vegetable garden, the coffee picking, the Green Phoenix mission, and which consists of individuals in the neighborhood caring for the river, the forest, and young people. And you will definitely hear more about this from Sajji soon. So one sustained engagement has been taking the groups for river cleanups with the Green Phoenix team. And this has, I think, been both a shocking and powerful experience where we're getting into like waist deep water to remove used diapers entangled in the bamboo branches on the banks. So and another project I did was with Lali, and she had me documenting all the annual species of impatiens, which is almost 60 species. And something that really amazed me was that some of the species were still unnamed by science in this group, but she knew everything about them and how to grow them, their preferences, their subtle differences, though they're, very tiny flowers. And I've also, I've slowly also brought in some of my learnings of the plants in the garden to share with groups and taking them out to observe them too. So besides the residential school and college groups, I've been taking on kids and young people who want to come independently in their holiday time. We always encourage the kids to come, whenever they wanted to. And this is mostly self-directed since they have been to the sanctuary before. And I kind of come in to help them plan it out. And I've really come to enjoy these independent, visits. And for me, I see them as an important exposure to a different way of relating, learning, and living. For me as well, it's always a fresh look at things. And so I mentioned, how the forest is central to us, and which is really the context of it all. And Saji and Suppi have really been core to this for me. I once accompanied a school group into the forest with Saji, and they were a particularly lively and noisy bunch. And I was saying to Saji, hey, we should probably ask them to kind of quieten down before we go in. And he just smiled at me and he said that, they should just be themselves and just enjoy the forest. And, what he was saying is that no one should ever leave the forest resenting it. And I thought, wow, this is such a different approach, and that's Saji. And it made me, I think for me, it made me ponder more over and kind of blur this sort of subconscious, division between humans and nature that, I also tend to make sometimes. And so I also have a little nook by the river, and where I often go by myself to kind of just give space and let my learnings have their way with me in a way. And I always feel like it gives me an expansive window to see through, and it kind of helps me or reminds me of my place in the scheme of things in a way. So, there's really so much to share, and so many stories from different parts of the land, and so many different people, nights spent sleeping under the stars on the tower, singing in the tower, and encounters with creatures and the funny places you might find them, like the leeches, and just mountains of discussions and dialogues and, wild dreams that the place might give you. So I think with that, I will pass it over to Lori. Thank you. Hope I didn't go too fast. You're on mute, Suppi.
Suppi, you're on mute. Shall I start?
Yeah, you can start. Yeah.
So thank you, Nikita. Maybe I'll start with an anecdote, a memory of, I was co-hosting a group of urban children in a beautiful natural spot, and they were supposed initially to be there for 3 weeks, but them and their families, they cut it down to 5 days because the rant was, what shall we do in the forest? This was not at the sanctuary. What shall we do in the forest? There is no pizza place, there is no cinema, there is no shops. How boring. And so with the families, they convinced the school they were coming from to just go for 5 days. So I was waiting with the others in this place, and they came with their buses. They got off the bus and they sat down in a circle and they started talking about the latest movies and their computer games and their boyfriends and girlfriends and the pizzas and things. And also complaining, why should we be in this place? There is no comfort here and it's scary and so on. And after 5 days, you could see them running in the forest, diving into the water and doing all sorts of things, inventing adventure games. And they complain, why do we have to go home now? Can't we stay here? No? And for me, it was quite an illustration of how thin is the coat of civilization or of culture that we have on us. And given the right circumstances, I think we all resonate with some energy which is there in the wild. No? And yeah, so I think that growing up with wilderness should be declared one of the fundamental rights of children. I was lucky to grow in a village in Switzerland, in some beautiful hills, and I think we were spending all of our free time in the woods and on the hillside. And I think that because of that, also because maybe coming from a family where people were questioning a little bit some philosophical questioning of how society functions. I think from the perspective that nature gives, I was looking at the civilization I was part of and seeing the nonsense that was going on. We had, for instance, some magic places that we were going to see snakes, and there were water points. And as I grew up, I could see all these places being desecrated, torn apart by JCBs and built over with roads and houses and cement and so on, by people who were coming from outside just for speculation. And it didn't feel right at all, and I could see it happen around us. Traditionally, villages where I was coming from were clusters of houses tucked together, and the land, the farmland around was kind of free and accessible for everybody, and quite beautifully built as well and managed. But over time, the whole thing got kind of fragmented into small private possessions, private properties with fenced-off gardens, these little villas. And if you look at it from the mountaintop now, it's quite an ugly scene, really. So right from a fairly early age, I was aware that something was not quite right in the way we humans live there. Then just to see how I came to the sanctuary, I stumbled into Jiddu Krishnamurti's teachings, for those who know him, and I felt how here is the best, I would say, exploration and expression of the disease of civilization. And over time, life brought me to work in a Krishnamurti school in England, to be a teacher there. And there, the question of how do we educate ourselves and children to live not in such a mad way. And it included now what is our relationship with nature? How do we live with the land in a healthy way? So these were prominent questions every day of our teaching there. So there was a group there with staff members and some senior students working on a course called Care for the Land. And one winter we took a trip to India, which took us to the Botanical Sanctuary. And I fell in love with the place. First, the forest which is there, Wolfgang, the founder, took us to some amazing hill hikes along river beds into the forest. But also I saw people there dedicating all their day to just cultivating plants, and it was not for commercial purpose to make money. As far as I know, not a single plant was ever sold there. They would donate them to people who were caring for them. So it was not done with any wealth in mind, just to protect this species, which Wolfgang and his partners, they could see slowly disappearing for the forests, which were being cut for various purposes for exploitation. So right from maybe the second year I visited there, very soon after, Suprabha, whom I'd known in Brockwood Park, she decided to start the education programs, and she roped me in to help with that, which I was very happy to do. So I would spend all my holiday times, in the winters especially, visiting them, and whenever I could, to also give a hand with the programs, how to design them, how to run them. So over the first few years, actually it's still going on, we evolved a sort of pedagogy of nature education, which I wouldn't say is we haven't any set system really, you just really go with your guts and your sensitivity. But maybe some things that were kind of fixed or permanent, there is this one, looking at how the sanctuary came about. Wolfgang, who started it, he didn't have any previous knowledge of botany. of ecology, and he went there, but by living in solitude, mostly in the forest for 2, 3, 4 years, so probably we can tell us the story better. He encountered all these wild creatures and he learned a lot about them. And he also saw how they were slowly becoming rarer and not being respected by this deforestation going on. So he came to, again, slowly, not out of an initial plan, to develop this botanic garden, which was a kind of, well, they called it sanctuary because it was a kind of Noah's Ark for as many species they could collect there, plant species. The fact that he learned everything by himself directly in relationship with creatures, I think was kind of fundamental to the education world, which came from that. One early realization is that there is no point in creating zoos and ex situ conservation and any conservation if people's mind don't change. Now we are going on at large, destroying the world, and we can have these little islands, but what can they achieve if things go on like they're going on now, right? The Amazon burning, I mean, the whole world burning now, literally. So it became clear that education was also an important work to do, to try to help people to get closer to nature. And as Wolfgang put it, I think one day quite clearly, which we shared, was only by interacting closely, entering into a personal relationship with creatures, observing them, studying them with respect, you begin to feel a kind of deep beauty which is there in creation, right? And when you feel that, it touches you, and that's maybe the only thing that can make you really want to dedicate your life to protect nature. So the question was, how do we bring people who are not used to it, who are maybe used to living in a city, to develop a personal, close relationship with nature? Can we find shortcuts for that? So that has been one of the, I would say, basic challenges of the work we have been doing. And we quickly realized it's not a question of knowledge. You can learn the names of plants, of birds. You can learn fire making skills and what you want. It's not a question of knowledge and skill. It's really a question of how do you develop a relationship with anything, with anyone really, any creature, whether it is human or not human. So I think our work, as far as I'm concerned, became more and more just creating a safe space and let people loose out there, to swim in the river, walk in the forest, climb the trees, watch the snakes. So they would go for solos on their own in tucked away places to take in the beauty which is there. And also, also I think just being out is not enough, because I know people who go out there with a rifle to hunt things or not to do extractive collections or whatever. And that's not, you're in nature, but it doesn't play the magic. So how to create an atmosphere or a dialogue where people would approach nature with an open mind, open eyes, and essentially find their own relationship. You cannot mediate it really. So that's why I think it's more a question of creating a space where this can happen and encourage people to go out. So one thing that also became quite clear from the beginning is that this relationship is first-hand. So you cannot read about it in a book or watch it in a documentary. So we were asking, once school groups would come to the sanctuary, they would ask not to bring any books, not to bring cameras or binoculars. Now they do, especially more advanced groups, but initially we want the approach to be completely with your eyes, your ears, your bare feet, your body when you go into the water, your hands when you climb and you do things. So we just create opportunities through all sorts of activities, which include working with the land and with the people there, as you can see in the pictures now. Forest hikes, tree climbing, nature studies firsthand. So it can be for a few days or for a few weeks. People choose something that they are touched by in nature and then dedicate a lot of time just getting close to it and studying it and documenting it and sharing it with others, which creates a kind of very lively culture. we got them to write stories out of the observations once, and it was really magic how the stories became intense because of all the material which came from their senses. So yes, I would say this was a bit the adventure. And then we started with school children, and then Wolfgang and Suprabha decided that because of the depth and the expertise that the place had, that they wanted to try to address also adults. We also noticed that virtually all the kids there, except very few exceptions, they had a great time when they were there. But when you go back to the city and to the mainstream culture, the power is very strong there and you get swept away again. Huh? And so the experience you have in a place like the sanctuary becomes a sort of nice holiday, but yeah, it's left for the holiday time. So the question is it possible for people to be touched in a deeper way so that they will turn their life to a different lifestyle? So we started asking schools to send the children for longer stretches and to send them for repeated visits, which seems to work better. And then we had longer programs with young adults. We started with a 3-month program with CFL students, Center for Learning from Bangalore. They were also the first school who sent their kids to us just to try out this nature pedagogy and develop it with us. And it worked very well. So we repeated this 3-month program. And after a few years, the sanctuary decided to go at it again. And so they created the Life Skills and Landscapes Course. This was a 5-month program starting at the sanctuary with a 3 months immersion in nature, learning again from direct exposure, and then visiting projects all the way up to the Himalayas with other groups of their friends who were working a bit in a similar way. And it proved quite a, I would say, quite a successful program in the sense that it was quite seminal for many of the people participating. But running something like this for a small place like the sanctuary, they are really working on a very, very small budget, was quite demanding. And so it could not be offered every year. So I think we ran it maybe 5 or 6 times, small groups. Then it was on pause for a while, and but the work with school children continued. They proposed also some workshops for adults to do with art and nature and different things and plants. And then more recently, 2 years ago, not last year, the previous one, there was talk of starting again something with adults, because also the situation is getting quite urgent and we cannot wait for the next generation to save the world. We really have to get at it right now. So together with other 2 places, Marudam School and their Forest Way and Vazand working in the Nilgiris. These are all people doing conservation work and education work. So there was a decision to create a new adult program. In this time it was 10 months long. 3 months in each place, plus 1 month for rounding up at the end. So it started in Tamil Nadu in the summer, and then it came to the Botanical Sanctuary, where I was lucky enough to be able to join them for 3 months or more. And then moving to the Nilgiris, and then I had to go back anyway for visa reasons, but the COVID thing came in right then, and so the whole thing was had to be suspended. Unfortunately, because it was, I would say, from my perspective, it was working well. It seemed that people were being touched by something and becoming quite keen to continue with what they were learning there. So maybe this is in a nutshell. And for me, it's ongoing work, because wherever I am, I feel that it's paramount to find that energy that one can find with nature. And without that, I think the learning which is happening in the mainstream is all geared to really maintain a lifestyle which is destroying the whole planet. So how to find opportunities and what to do to get as many people as possible to be in touch with this kind of pristine energy, which makes you ask questions, makes you wonder, it makes you also feel very happy and healthy and wanting to do things. I'll leave it to that for now. We'll see if there are any questions later.
Great. Shirley, are you ready? Saji?
Hello?
Okay. Shirley?
I'm here.
Yeah.
Very.
So over to Saji, and who will be translated by Shirley. Saji, തുടങ്ങിക്കോ.
എൻ്റെ പേര് സജി. ഞാൻ ജനിച്ചതും വളർന്നതും ഇത് ഫോറസ്റ്റിന്റെ ഒക്കെ ഒരു സൈഡാണ്. അപ്പോൾ കേൾക്കുന്നുണ്ടോ?
കേൾക്കുന്നുണ്ട്.
പിന്നെ ഞാൻ കാട്ടിൽ തന്നെയാണ്. ഞാൻ എൻ്റെ ചിറ്റപ്പൻ്റെ കൂടെയാണ് കാട്ടിൽ പോകാൻ തുടങ്ങിയത്. ചിറ്റപ്പനാണ് കാടിനെ കുറിച്ചെല്ലാം പഠിപ്പിച്ചതും ചിറ്റപ്പനാണ്. അങ്ങനെ മരത്തിനെ കുറിച്ചൊന്നും അറിയില്ലായിരുന്നു, ആദ്യമൊന്നും അറിയില്ല മരത്തിനെ കുറിച്ചൊന്നും. അപ്പോൾ ചിറ്റപ്പനൊക്കെ കൂടി കാട്ടിൽ പോകും. അങ്ങനെ ഓരോ മരങ്ങൾ. അപ്പോൾ ഞങ്ങളുടെ ഒരു ജീവിത മാർഗം തേനാണ്. തേനെടുത്തൊക്കെയാണ് ഞങ്ങൾ ജീവിക്കുക. അങ്ങനെ തേനെടുക്കാൻ പോകുമ്പോൾ മരത്തിനെ കുറിച്ച് എളുപ്പത്തിൽ പഠിക്കാൻ പറ്റിയത് ഈ ചിറ്റപ്പൻ്റെ കൂടെ പോകുമ്പോൾ ചിറ്റപ്പൻ ഒരു മരം കാണിച്ചിട്ട് പറയും, ആ മരത്തിന്റെ പേര് പറയും. ആ വയനാവിലൊന്ന് തേൻ നോക്കിയിട്ട് വാ, ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ ആ പൂവത്തിലൊന്ന് തേൻ നോക്കിയിട്ട് വാ, ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ ആ വെള്ളപ്പൈനിലൊന്ന് തേൻ നോക്കിയിട്ട് വാ, അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ പറയുമായിരുന്നു. അപ്പൊ ഞാനിങ്ങനെ പോവും, പറയുന്നിടത്ത് പോവും, അനുസരിക്കുമായിരുന്നു. പോയി നോക്കുമ്പോൾ എനിക്ക് മരം അറിയില്ല, ഏതായിരിക്കും ചിറ്റപ്പൻ പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ടാവും മരം. അങ്ങനെ ഞാൻ നോക്കിയിട്ട് എനിക്ക് മരം അറിയില്ലല്ലോ. തേന് ഏത് മരത്തിലാണോ? കുറെ മരങ്ങളുണ്ടല്ലോ, ചുറ്റും മരങ്ങളുണ്ട്. പക്ഷെ ഏത് മരമാണ് വയനാവ്, ഏത് മരമാണ് വെള്ളപ്പയൻ? ഇങ്ങനെ ഞാൻ ലാസ്റ്റ് ചിറ്റപ്പനെ അടുത്ത് വിളിക്കും, ഏതാണ് വയനാവ്? അങ്ങനെ ചിറ്റപ്പൻ പറയാം, ഇത് ആ മരമാണ്. പിന്നെ റോസ് കളറിൽ കാണുന്നില്ല, കുറച്ച് റോസ് എന്ന് പറയാൻ അറിയില്ല, ഒരു ചുമപ്പ് അങ്ങനത്തെ രീതിയിൽ മണ്ണ് കളർ അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ പറയാ. മണ്ണ് കളർ ആ മരത്തിൽ നോക്കാൻ പറയും. അപ്പൊ ഞാൻ മനസ്സിലാക്കും. അപ്പൊ ഞാൻ നോക്കും, ഓ അപ്പൊ ഇതാണ് വയനാവ്. അങ്ങനെ ഞാൻ മനസ്സിൽ ഇങ്ങനെ അത് മനസ്സിൽ തന്നെ വെക്കും. അപ്പൊ എൻ്റെ മനസ്സിൽ നിൽക്കും അത് പിന്നെ ഒരിക്കലും ഞാൻ മറക്കില്ല. കാരണം അങ്ങനെ കിട്ടുന്ന അറിവ് നമ്മൾ ആരും ഒരിക്കലും മറക്കില്ല. കാരണം അതുപോലെ പറഞ്ഞു തരുന്ന ഒരു അറിവ് ഒരിക്കലും മറക്കില്ല. എൻ്റെ അനുഭവമാണ്, ഒരിക്കലും മറക്കില്ല. ഞാൻ മറന്നിട്ടില്ല. ഓരോ മരവും എനിക്ക് അങ്ങനെയാണ് പിന്നെ ഞാൻ പഠിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളത്. ഇപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ ഈ കാട്ടിൽ തന്നെ ഒരുപാട് മരങ്ങളുണ്ട്. ഈ മരങ്ങളെല്ലാം പേര് ഈ രീതിയിലൊക്കെയാണ് ഞാൻ പഠിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളത്. ഈ അറിവ് എനിക്ക് എൻ്റെ ഇവിടുത്തെ കുട്ടികൾ, എൻ്റെ വീട്ടിലെ എൻ്റെ കോളനിയിലെ കുട്ടികൾ, ഇവർക്കും ഞാൻ ഈ വഴി തന്നെയാണ് പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കുന്നത്. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ പിന്നെ സംചരിൽ വരുന്ന കുട്ടികളെയും ഞാൻ ആ രീതിയിൽ പഠിപ്പിച്ചില്ല, ആ രീതിയിൽ തന്നെ പഠിപ്പിക്കണം എന്നാണ് ഞാൻ ആഗ്രഹിക്കുന്നത്. പക്ഷെ അതിന് കുറെ സമയം വേണം. എനിക്ക് കിട്ടുന്ന സമയം വളരെ കുറവാണ്. എനിക്ക് ആ കിട്ടുന്ന സമയം ഒരു 2 മണിക്കൂർ 3 മണിക്കൂർ അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ സമയം എനിക്ക് കിട്ടാറുള്ളൂ. അപ്പൊ ആ സമയം കൊണ്ട് എനിക്ക് കുട്ടികൾക്ക് പഠിപ്പിക്കാൻ പറ്റില്ല. പിന്നെ ഞാൻ ഈ ഉള്ള സമയം കൊണ്ട് ഞാൻ പഠിപ്പിക്കാൻ ഉദ്ദേശിക്കുന്നത് ഒരു റൗണ്ടിന് ഒരു 2-3 മരം അങ്ങനെ പഠിപ്പിക്കാൻ ശ്രമിക്കുന്നു. പിന്നെ അതുകൂടാതെ കുട്ടികളെ കാടിനെ കുറിച്ച് പഠിപ്പിക്കാൻ ഞാൻ കാട്ടിലേക്ക് വിടും. കുട്ടികളെ ഇതങ്ങ് വിടും. ഞാൻ വെറുതെ മാറി നിൽക്കും. എന്നാലും എൻ്റെ നോട്ടത്തിൽ തന്നെ ഉണ്ടാവും. എന്നാലും ഞാൻ മാറി നിൽക്കും. നിങ്ങൾ പോയിക്കോ, ഇതിലെങ്കിലും പോയിക്കോ, നിങ്ങൾ കാടൊക്കെ ഒന്ന് കണ്ടിട്ട് വാ എന്നൊക്കെ പറഞ്ഞിട്ട് അങ്ങനെ വിടും. അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ പഠിപ്പിക്കലുണ്ട്. കാടിനെ കുറിച്ച് പഠിക്കണമെങ്കിൽ അങ്ങനെ നമ്മൾ വെറുതെ അങ്ങ് വിടും. നമ്മൾ തന്നെ കൂട്ടിക്കൊണ്ട് നടന്ന ഇപ്പൊ സജി ഉണ്ടല്ലോ കൂടെ, നമുക്ക് പേടിക്കണ്ട, ധൈര്യത്തിൽ പോവാം. അത് ആ ഒരു മനസ്സിലുണ്ടാവും കുട്ടികളുടെ മനസ്സിലൊക്കെ. അപ്പൊ അത് മാറണമെങ്കിൽ നമ്മൾ കുട്ടികളെ നല്ല വേറെ ഒന്നും അപകടമില്ലാത്ത സ്ഥലത്ത്, സുരക്ഷിതമായ ഏതെങ്കിലും ഒരു സ്ഥലത്ത് കൊണ്ടുപോയിട്ട് വെറുതെ വിട്ട് നിങ്ങൾ പൊക്കോ, ഏതിലെങ്കിലും പൊക്കോ എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു വിട്ടാൽ അവർക്ക് ശ്രദ്ധ ഉണ്ടാവും. കാട്ടിൽ ഞാൻ ഒറ്റയ്ക്കേ ഉള്ളൂ, എൻ്റെ കൂടെ ആരുമില്ല. അപ്പോൾ അതിൻ്റെ ശ്രദ്ധ എനിക്ക് വേണം. അപ്പൊ മരങ്ങളെ ആണെങ്കിലും ഈ പിന്നെ എന്താണെങ്കിലും പിന്നെ ആദ്യം പിന്നെ നമ്മൾ ഒറ്റയ്ക്ക് പോയാലും നമ്മൾ ഒറ്റയ്ക്കല്ലെന്ന് തോന്നുള്ളൂ. കാരണം നമുക്ക് കാടിനെ കുറിച്ച് അറിയാം, മരങ്ങളുണ്ട്, ചുറ്റും കൂട്ടുകാർ. അങ്ങനെ നമ്മൾ പിന്നെ കാട്ടിൽ പോയാൽ നമുക്ക് ചുറ്റും കൂട്ടുകാരുണ്ട്. അങ്ങനെ തോന്നിക്കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ നമുക്ക് പിന്നെ പേടി ഉണ്ടാവില്ല. ശരിക്കും അങ്ങനെ മനസ്സിൽ തോന്നുന്നവനാണ് ശരിക്കും ഒരു പ്രകൃതി സ്നേഹി. മരത്തിനെ സ്നേഹിക്കും, അങ്ങനെയുള്ളവൾ മരത്തിനെ സ്നേഹിക്കും. ഒന്നും ചെയ്യില്ല, കാട്ടിൽ പോയാൽ ഒന്നും ചെയ്യില്ല. എല്ലാം സ്നേഹം തന്നെയായിരിക്കും.
സജി, ഞാനൊന്ന് ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യട്ടെ, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ അതിന്റെ ഫ്ലോ.
ഓക്കെ.
Hello. Saji saying, my name is Saji. I was born near this Peria forest and all my life I have spent here. As a child, as children, we used to be taken to the forest. I used to go to the forest mostly with my uncle, Tholan. He has told me the name of the uncle before, Tholan. Our people make a living out of honey. So we all go to the forest to gather honey. And then when we go like this, the uncle will say, Saji, look for honey on that Vainav tree or on that Vellapine tree or that Poovam tree. Now I would look all around, but I wouldn't know which is Vainav, which is Vellapine. So I will ask uncle, which is Vainav? And then uncle will tell me, see, look at the tree with light red leaves or mud colored leaves. And then I made the tree. Then I would know. I realized this is Vainav. I realized this is Vellapine. I realized this is Poovam. So that's how we learn. Now I tell you, when we learn like this, we never forget. I'm telling you my experience. I never forget. It is such knowledge that I try to share with the children who come with me to the forest. The children of my clan as well as the children who come to GPS. But the children who come to GPS get to spend only 2 or 3 hours with me. And in this short while, I cannot share knowledge in this manner. So instead, I try to introduce 2 or 3 trees to them. And sometimes I, do another, I teach in another way. I take them to a safe place and I say, now go explore the forest. Do whatever you want to do. See, if they come always with me, then they will think, Saji is with me. I don't have to fear anything. That wouldn't do. They have to be in the forest by themselves. And then they will know. They will pay attention. They will know they are not alone. They will know they have friends, plenty of friends. And they will feel comfortable. A person who feels that way comfortable is really a nature lover. Then they will love everything, nature, trees. That's how love or knowledge should be imparted. Saji? അങ്ങനെ കാട്ടിൽ പോയിട്ട് കുട്ടികളെ ഇങ്ങനെ വെറുതെ വിട്ടാല് അപ്പൊ അവർ അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെ പഠിക്കുന്നവർ ശരിക്കുള്ള പ്രകൃതി സ്നേഹികൾ എന്നാണ് സജി പറഞ്ഞത്. സജി എങ്ങനെ ഒറ്റയ്ക്ക് കാട്ടിൽ പോവാൻ തുടങ്ങിയത്?
ഒറ്റയ്ക്ക് പിന്നെ ആദ്യം പിന്നെ ചിറ്റപ്പനെ കണ്ടായിരുന്നല്ലോ. അപ്പൊ എനിക്ക് ചിറ്റപ്പൻ കൂടെ ഉണ്ടല്ലോ, അപ്പൊ എനിക്ക് പേടിക്കേണ്ട ആവശ്യമില്ല. അപ്പൊ എനിക്ക് പിന്നെ ചിറ്റപ്പനുണ്ട്, അതുകൊണ്ട് എനിക്ക് പേടിക്കേണ്ട, ധൈര്യത്തിൽ എവിടെ വേണമെങ്കിൽ പോവാ, ചിറ്റപ്പൻ പുറകെ ഉണ്ടല്ലോ എന്നുള്ളൊരു ധൈര്യം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. പിന്നെ ഞാൻ കുറെ എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്നു ഒരു 10-12 വയസ്സിലാന്ന് തോന്നുന്നു ഒറ്റയ്ക്ക് കാട്ടിൽ പോവാൻ തുടങ്ങി. 10-15 ഏകദേശം, ഓർമ്മയില്ല. അപ്പൊ ഞാൻ കാട്ടിൽ പോകുമ്പോ ആദ്യം പിന്നെ എനിക്ക് ഒരു ചെറിയ പേടി ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അങ്ങനെ ആദ്യം പോകുമ്പോ ഒരു പേടി ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു, ആരും ഇല്ലല്ലോ എൻ്റെ കൂടെ. പിന്നെ പോകുമ്പോ നമ്മൾ തന്നെ എൻ്റെ മനസ്സിൽ തന്നെ തോന്നുവാണ്, നമുക്ക് ആരും ഉണ്ടല്ലോ, ഞാൻ ഒറ്റയ്ക്കല്ലല്ലോ, ചുറ്റും ആളുള്ളത് പോലെ ഒരു ഫീല്. അതായത് പിന്നെ എനിക്ക് തോന്നുവാണ്. അപ്പൊ പിന്നെ ഈ മരത്തിനെ കുറിച്ചൊന്നും അന്ന് കറക്റ്റ് അറിയില്ല, കുറെയൊക്കെ പിന്നെ പഠിക്കുന്നേ ഉള്ളായിരുന്നു. ഈ മരത്തിനെ കുറിച്ചും പ്രകൃതിയെ കുറിച്ചും പിന്നെ അത്ര അറിവൊന്നും ഇല്ലായിരുന്നു. ഞങ്ങൾ തന്നെ ഒരു പ്രകൃതി ആയിരുന്നു, അത് പിന്നീടാണ് എനിക്ക് മനസ്സിലായത്. അപ്പൊ ഞാൻ കാട്ടിൽ പോവും. ഇപ്പൊ കാട്ടില് പിന്നെ ഒറ്റയ്ക്കല്ല, ചുറ്റും ആളുണ്ട് എന്നുള്ളൊരു തോന്നല്, അത് നമുക്ക് തോന്നിയതാ, എന്റെ മനസ്സിൽ അങ്ങനെ തോന്നുവാണ്. അപ്പൊ എനിക്ക് ധൈര്യമായി. ഇഷ്ടം പോലെ മരങ്ങളുണ്ടല്ലോ, മനുഷ്യരെ പോലെ തന്നെയാണല്ലോ മരങ്ങളും, അപ്പൊ ഞാൻ ഒറ്റയ്ക്കല്ലല്ലോ, അങ്ങനെ ഒരു തോന്നല് വന്നു. പിന്നെ പണ്ട് വേറൊരു ശീലം ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. പിന്നെ കാട്ടിൽ പോകുമ്പോ വെറുതെ കത്തി ഉണ്ടാവും കയ്യില്, അപ്പൊ വെറുതെ ഒന്ന് വെട്ടി നോക്കുക. അങ്ങനെ അത് ഞാൻ അറിവില്ലായ്മ കൊണ്ട് ആദ്യമൊക്കെ ചെയ്യുമായിരുന്നു. വെറുതെ ഒരു തമാശ വെട്ടി നോക്കുമായിരുന്നു. പിന്നെ ഒരു ദിവസം ഞാൻ ഈ മരം ഇങ്ങനെ പോകുന്ന വഴിക്ക് പിന്നെ വെറുതെ ഒരു മരം വെട്ടിയപ്പോൾ പെട്ടെന്ന് അതിൽ നിന്നൊരു ഒച്ച കേട്ടു, ഷൂന്നൊരു ഒച്ച. അപ്പൊ എനിക്ക് പിന്നെ പെട്ടെന്നൊരു തോന്നല്, ഇതെന്തായിരിക്കും ഒച്ച കേട്ടിട്ടുണ്ടാവുക. അപ്പൊ പെട്ടെന്ന് എൻ്റെ മനസ്സ് തന്നെ പറയുകയാണ്, ഈ മരത്തിനെ ഞാൻ വെട്ടിയപ്പോൾ അതിന് വേദനയായി, അതിനെ നൊന്തു. അങ്ങനെ ഈ മരത്തിന് നൊന്തപ്പാണ് അയ്യോ എന്നൊരു സൗണ്ട്. അപ്പൊ എനിക്ക് തോന്നി അത് മരം കരഞ്ഞതായിരിക്കാം എന്ന്. അങ്ങനെ എനിക്ക് അത് മനസ്സിലായി, സ്വയം ഞാൻ തന്നെ മനസ്സിലാക്കിയത്. അങ്ങനെയാണ് ഞാൻ ഈ മരം പിന്നെ മരത്തിനെ അങ്ങനെ അന്ന് ഞാൻ നിർത്തി. മരം ഇങ്ങനെ വെറുതെ ഒരു തമാശക്കാണെങ്കിലും വെറുതെ വെട്ടൽ നിർത്തി. മരം ജീവനുണ്ടല്ലോ, അങ്ങനെയാണ് ഞാൻ അത് മനസ്സിലാക്കിയത്.
ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്യട്ടെ, പറയട്ടെ സജി. Initially, as a child, I used to go to the forest with my uncle. Then around the age of 10, 15, maybe, I began to go to the forest all by myself. Initially, there was a bit of fear. But by and by, I lost the fear. Then I didn't know so much about trees, didn't know so much about nature. And Saji says, we ourselves were nature, but I didn't know that then. Then in those days, I also had this habit of, carrying a knife always with me. And needed or not, I will cut some tree with a knife, make knife marks. Once when I cut a tree like that, I heard a sound, shh. I felt the tree was saying, are you in pain? And I understood the tree was crying. I understood that by myself. Nobody told me. And then I stopped cutting trees. Saji? പിന്നെ സജി ജീവിത മാർഗത്തിനൊക്കെ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് എന്താ ചെയ്തത്? കാട് തന്നെയായിരുന്നു ആദ്യം?
അല്ല, ജീവിതമാർഗം പിന്നെ ആദ്യം കാട് തന്നെ ആയിരുന്നു. പിന്നെ കാട്ടിൽ നിന്ന് കുറെ ആളുകളായപ്പോ ആദ്യമൊക്കെ കുറച്ച് ആൾക്കാരെ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നുള്ളൂ, വളരെ കുറവായിരുന്നു. അപ്പൊ ഇവിടെ ആള് പണ്ട് കാലത്ത് കുറച്ച് ആൾക്കാരല്ലേ ഉള്ളൂ. അപ്പൊ അന്ന് കാടിൽ ഉണ്ടായിരുന്നു. പിന്നെ പിന്നെ വന്നപ്പോ പിന്നെ കുട്ടികളുണ്ട്, കുട്ടികളെ പിന്നെ കുറെ ആൾക്കാർ ഇങ്ങനെ വീട്ടിൽ തന്നെ കൂടി വന്നു. അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെ വന്നപ്പോ ഈ കാട് തന്നെ പോരാ എന്നൊരു തോന്നല്. അപ്പൊ പുറത്തൊക്കെ കൃഷിയൊക്കെ ഉണ്ടല്ലോ, അതുപോലെ നമുക്കും എന്തെങ്കിലും കൃഷി ചെയ്താലോ എന്നൊരു പിന്നെ തോന്നല് മനസ്സിൽ തോന്നി. അങ്ങനെ ഞാനും ഒരു 2-3 വർഷം ഞാനും കൃഷി തുടങ്ങി. കൃഷി തുടങ്ങുമ്പോ ഇവരൊക്കെ പിന്നെ പുറമക്കാരൊക്കെ ചെയ്യും പോലെ ഞാനും പിന്നെ അത്യാവശ്യം വളമൊക്കെ ഇടും, മരുന്നടിക്കും, അങ്ങനത്തെ ഇതൊക്കെ ചെയ്യുമായിരുന്നു. പിന്നെ അങ്ങനെ ഒരു ദിവസം എൻ്റെ മോള് അന്ന് എനിക്ക് തോന്നുന്ന ഒരു 8-9 പഠിക്കുന്ന സമയം, ഞാനിങ്ങനെ പാവയ്ക്ക നട്ടു, അതിന് മരുന്നടിക്കുമായിരുന്നു. മരുന്നടിച്ചു കൊണ്ടിരിക്കുമ്പോൾ മോള് വന്ന് കണ്ടിട്ട്, മോള് വന്ന് കാണുമ്പോൾ കുറെ തവള ഇതൊക്കെ ചത്തു കിടക്കുന്നു. അപ്പൊ മോള് പറഞ്ഞു, അച്ഛാ ഇത് അച്ഛൻ പിന്നെ മരുന്നടിച്ചത് കൊണ്ടല്ലേ ഇതൊക്കെ ചത്ത്, ഇത് പാടില്ല, ഞാന് സ്കൂളിൽ പഠിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്, ഇതിനെക്കുറിച്ചൊക്കെ പഠിക്കുന്നുണ്ട്, അപ്പൊ ഇത് പാടില്ല, ഇങ്ങനെ ചെയ്യാൻ പാടില്ല എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞു. അങ്ങനെ പിന്നെ ഞാൻ ആലോചിച്ചു, എനിക്ക് ഇതില്ലാതെ പറ്റില്ല, ഈ വേറെ ജീവിക്കാൻ വേറെ മാർഗം ഇല്ലല്ലോ, അപ്പൊ ഇത് ചെയ്തേ പറ്റൂ. പക്ഷെ മോള് പറഞ്ഞത് മനസ്സിലായി, ഞാൻ ചെയ്യുന്നത് തെറ്റാണ് എനിക്ക് മനസ്സിലായി. അങ്ങനെയാണ് പിന്നെ ഞാൻ സുപ്രഭ ചേച്ചി ഇങ്ങനെ ഇതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് പറഞ്ഞു, എന്തെങ്കിലും ഒരു പണി തരാം, പ്രകൃതി സംരക്ഷണം. അന്നേരം ആ വാക്കുപോലും അറിയില്ല, എന്താണ് പ്രകൃതി അതുപോലും അറിയില്ല. അങ്ങനെ ഞാൻ പിന്നെ കുറച്ച് മുമ്പ് പറയാൻ തുടങ്ങി. പക്ഷെ എനിക്ക് താല്പര്യമില്ലായിട്ടല്ല, എനിക്കറിയില്ല പ്രകൃതി എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എന്താ എന്ന് എനിക്കറിയില്ല. അങ്ങനെ ഞാനൊരു കുറെ പ്രാവശ്യം പറഞ്ഞപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ പിന്നെ നോക്കാം ഇങ്ങനെ വെച്ചു നിന്നു. പക്ഷെ കുറച്ച് കഴിഞ്ഞപ്പോൾ ജയ്മോൻ വന്ന് എന്നോട് പറഞ്ഞു കാര്യങ്ങൾ. അപ്പൊ കുറച്ചൊക്കെ മനസ്സിലായി, വളരെ കുറച്ച് മനസ്സിലായി. പിന്നെ ഇതിലേക്ക് ഫുൾ ടൈം കൃഷി നിർത്തി ഇതിലേക്ക് വന്നപ്പോ മനസ്സിനൊരു നല്ല ഒരു സുഖം. ഇതാണല്ലോ പ്രകൃതി, ഞാൻ തന്നെയാണല്ലോ പ്രകൃതി എന്ന് പിന്നീട് മനസ്സിലായി എനിക്ക്. ഞാൻ തന്നെയാണല്ലോ പ്രകൃതി, ഞാൻ ചെയ്തോണ്ടിരുന്നത് ഇതാണല്ലോ, ഈ പണിയാണല്ലോ ഞാൻ ചെയ്തോണ്ടിരുന്നത്. ഞാൻ ഫോറസ്റ്റ് സ്വന്തം ഉണ്ടാക്കി, ഞാൻ ഇതിന് മുന്നേ പ്രകൃതി ഇതിനെക്കുറിച്ച് പഠിക്കുന്നതിന് മുന്നേ ഞാൻ തന്നെ സ്വന്തം ഫോറസ്റ്റ് ഉണ്ടാക്കി. അപ്പൊ ഞാൻ മനസ്സിലാക്കുകയാണ്, ഞാൻ തന്നെയാണല്ലോ പ്രകൃതി, പിന്നെ എന്തിനു പ്രകൃതിയെ അന്വേഷിച്ച് പോകണം, പ്രകൃതിയെ പഠിക്കാൻ എന്തിനു പോകണം. അങ്ങനെയാണ് എനിക്ക് പിന്നെ ഇതൊക്കെ മനസ്സിലായത്. പിന്നെ കുറെ പുഴകളൊക്കെ വൃത്തിയാക്കി. അപ്പൊ ഇതൊക്കെ ഇതിന്റെ ഭാഗമാണ്. അത് അപ്പൊ മനസ്സിലായി ഇനി കുറെ പഠിക്കാനുണ്ട്, എനിക്ക് ഒന്നും അറിയില്ല. ഇപ്പൊ തന്നെ ഈ ഫോണിൽ ഈ മീറ്റിംഗ് തന്നെ എനിക്ക് പറ്റില്ലെന്ന് തോന്നിയതാണ്. അതും നടക്കുന്നു. ടീച്ചറെ
പറയട്ടെ. Initially, our people made a living from the forest by gathering honey and all that. But by and by, the forest grew smaller and the family grew bigger. So like most people around me, I too started doing agriculture, farming. And like most of us, I too used chemical manures and pesticides. One day, as I was spraying pesticides to the vegetables, my daughter, we all know her, Nisha, my daughter, she was in 8th standard or 9th standard at the time. She came and told me, see, Appa, when you are spraying pesticides, all these frogs and insects are all dying. So is that, it's not a good thing. We learned that in school. I understood what she said. I understood that, like what I'm doing is wrong. But I didn't have an option. I have to do some work. I have to make my living. GBS had always asked me to join their conservation program, but I was like hesitant initially. But after this incident, I joined. At the time, I didn't know even the word conservation. But slowly I learned and I realized, and also once I joined this conservation work, I was feeling happier. I realized I am nature. See, I was doing conservation all the time. Even before I learned the word, I was planting and making forests. I could do this. So now I'm doing whatever I can. Not that I know much. I have to learn much more. I do plant, trees. I help to clean the river. That's what I'm doing. And even this webinar, which I thought I will not be able to do, it's also happening. I'm happy. സജി പറഞ്ഞത്രയും ഞാൻ ട്രാൻസ്ലേറ്റ് ചെയ്തു. പിന്നെ കാട്ടിൽ കുട്ടികളെ കൊണ്ട് പോകുമ്പോ എന്തൊക്കെയാ കുട്ടികളോട് പറയാ?
പറഞ്ഞോട്ടെ.
പറഞ്ഞോളൂ.
പിന്നെ കാട്ടിൽ പോകുമ്പോ ഞാൻ ആദ്യം തന്നെ കുട്ടികൾ വരും. ഞാൻ ഒരു സ്ഥലം നിശ്ചയിക്കും. ആ സ്ഥലത്ത് കുട്ടികൾ വരും. അപ്പൊ കുട്ടികൾ വന്നു കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ കുട്ടികളോട് ആദ്യം പറയും, നമ്മൾ കാട്ടിലേക്കാണ് പോകുന്നത്. അപ്പൊ കാട്ടില് പിന്നെ പല സ്വഭാവക്കാരാണ്. മരാണെങ്കിലും മൃഗങ്ങളാണെങ്കിലും പല സ്വഭാവക്കാരാണല്ലോ. അപ്പൊ കുട്ടികളോട് ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കും, പിന്നെ കാട്ടിൽ പോകുമ്പോ ഇങ്ങനെ അധികം ഒച്ച ഉണ്ടാക്കാൻ പാടില്ല. പിന്നെ നമ്മൾ കുറെ ദൂരേക്ക് പിന്നെ ശ്രദ്ധിക്കണം. നമ്മളടുത്ത് ചുറ്റുവട്ടം മാത്രമല്ല, കുറെ ദൂരേക്ക് നമ്മൾ ശ്രദ്ധിക്കണം. അത് എന്തിനാന്ന് വെച്ചാല് കാട്ടില് പല സ്വഭാവമുള്ള പിന്നെ മൃഗങ്ങളും ഇതൊക്കെയാണല്ലോ ഉള്ളത്. നമ്മളെ ഉപദ്രവിക്കുന്നത് ഉണ്ടാകാം, ഇല്ല ചിലപ്പോൾ നല്ല സ്വഭാവക്കാരുണ്ടാകാം. അപ്പൊ അവരിൽ നിന്നും നമുക്ക് രക്ഷ നേടണമെങ്കിൽ നമ്മൾ അവരെ അടുത്ത് പോയി പിന്നെ എത്തിയാല് മുട്ടിപ്പോയാല് ചിലപ്പോൾ അവര് നമ്മളെ ഉപദ്രവിക്കാൻ വന്നതാന്ന് വിചാരിച്ച് നമ്മളെ തിരിച്ച് ഉപദ്രവിക്കാൻ സാധ്യതയുണ്ട്. അപ്പൊ നമ്മൾ പിന്നെ ശരിക്കും പറഞ്ഞാൽ നമ്മള് കാട്ടിൽ പോകുമ്പോ തന്നെ പിന്നെ ആദ്യം നമ്മൾ ശ്രദ്ധിക്കേണ്ടത് ചെവി. നമ്മൾ നിൽക്കുന്നതിനേക്കാളും കുറെ മുമ്പോട്ട് ചെവി പിന്നെ ഇതിന്റെ കേൾവി ശക്തി അത് വിടുക. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ മൂക്ക്, നമ്മൾ ശ്വസിക്കുന്ന മണം. മൃഗങ്ങളുടെ മണമൊക്കെ ഒരു പ്രത്യേക ടൈപ്പ് മണങ്ങളാണല്ലോ. അപ്പൊ അത് നമ്മൾ ശ്രദ്ധിക്കുക. എന്തെങ്കിലും മണത്താൽ ശ്രദ്ധിക്കുക. ഇതൊരു പ്രത്യേക സൈസ് മണാണല്ലോ, ഇത് നമ്മൾ പിന്നെ ശ്രദ്ധിക്കണം എന്ന് നമുക്ക് തോന്നും. അപ്പൊ അത് ശ്രദ്ധിക്കുക. അതുപോലെ കാട്ടിൽ പോകുമ്പോ നടക്കുമ്പോ എല്ലാം ശ്രദ്ധിക്കേണ്ട കാര്യങ്ങൾ കാട്ടില്. പെട്ടെന്ന് ഞാൻ ഒരു ആനേന്റെ ഒരു എന്താ പറയാ ആനന്റെ ഒരു പിന്നെ സിഗ്നൽ കേൾക്കുക. എനിക്ക് കേൾക്കുന്നു, പക്ഷെ കുട്ടിയെ കേൾക്കുന്നില്ല. പെട്ടെന്ന് കേൾക്കുക. പെട്ടെന്ന് കുട്ടികൾ പിന്നെ ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്, പല കുട്ടികളോടും ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞിട്ടുണ്ട്, പെട്ടെന്ന് നിങ്ങൾ ആന ഉണ്ടെന്ന് അറിഞ്ഞാൽ നിങ്ങൾ ആന ഉണ്ടല്ലോ ഓടാം, അങ്ങനെ പേടിച്ചോടാം, അങ്ങനത്തെ അത് പറ്റില്ല. കാട്ടിൽ പോകുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ വളരെ ശ്രദ്ധിക്കേണ്ടത് ഓടാണ്ടിരിക്കുക, പരമാവധി ഓടാണ്ടിരിക്കുക. പതുക്കെ പിന്നെ നമ്മളെ ആരാ കൊണ്ടുപോകുന്നത്, ഇപ്പൊ ഞാനായിക്കോട്ടെ, ഇപ്പൊ ടീച്ചർ ആയിക്കോട്ടെ, ആര് കൊണ്ടുപോയാലും അവരെ പിന്നെ സമ്മതമില്ലാതെ നമ്മൾ ഓടാൻ പാടില്ല. ഓടിയാൽ നമ്മളിപ്പോ ഒരു 10 കുട്ടികളെ നമ്മൾ കാട്ടിൽ കൊണ്ടുപോയാൽ ഈ 10 കുട്ടികളും 10 ഭാഗത്തേക്ക് ഓടിക്കഴിഞ്ഞാൽ ഈ കൊണ്ടുപോകുന്ന ആൾക്ക് പിന്നെ വളരെ ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടുണ്ടാക്കുന്ന ഒരു കാര്യമാണ്. ഈ 10 കുട്ടികൾ ഒരു സ്ഥലത്ത് നിന്നാൽ, ഇപ്പൊ ഞാൻ പറയുകയാണ് കുട്ടികളെ നമുക്ക് ആ വഴിക്ക് പോകാൻ പാടില്ല, അപകടമാണ്, നമുക്ക് ഈ വഴിക്ക് പോകണം, എന്നാൽ നമ്മൾ രക്ഷപ്പെടുള്ളൂ. അപ്പൊ അങ്ങനെ പോയാൽ നമുക്ക് കാട്ടിൽ പോകുമ്പോൾ അപകടം ഉണ്ടാവില്ല.
പറയട്ടെ സജി. സജിക്ക് കുറച്ചുകൂടി പറയാനുണ്ടോ? ഒരുമിച്ച് പറയാം, ഇതങ്ങ് പറയട്ടെ. കാട്ടിലെ when Saji goes into the forest with children, he tells them, see, we are going into the forest. In the forest, there are diverse animals and plants. We have to pay attention, not only to the immediate surroundings, but to all around and far. See, if we run into something accidentally, there can be danger. Our ears have to be active. We have to listen. Our nose has to be active. We have to smell. For example, see, if I smell or hear an elephant, I tell the children might not have heard, but I tell them, see, once you know that, don't react suddenly. Wait for the instruction of the person who is with you. Otherwise, if you run in different directions, there can be even more danger. That's what you tell the children when you go with them into the forest. Saji, പിന്നെ കാട് നമ്മളെ എങ്ങനെയൊക്കെയാ പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്നത്? ഇങ്ങനെയുള്ള പഠിപ്പിക്കലുണ്ട്. ആന കാണും. പിന്നെ പൊതുവെ കാട്ടിന്ന് നമ്മള്
അതെ, കാടെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ പിന്നെ കാട്ടില് ശരിക്കും പറഞ്ഞാല് കാടെന്ന് പറയുമ്പോ തന്നെ എനിക്ക് മരങ്ങള്, വള്ളികള്, ഇതൊക്കെയാണ് എൻ്റെ മനസ്സിൽ പെട്ടെന്ന് വരിക. കാടെന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ എനിക്ക് കുറെ സംസാരിക്കാനുണ്ട്, പക്ഷെ പിന്നെ സമയത്തിന്റെ ഒരു ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടുണ്ട്. അതുകൊണ്ട് കാട്ടില് പല തമാശകളുണ്ട്. മനുഷ്യരെ പോലെ തന്നെ പല തമാശകളും സങ്കടങ്ങളും എല്ലാം ഉണ്ട്. സങ്കടം ഞാൻ പറയാം, കാട്ടിലെ സങ്കടം. കാട്ടിലിപ്പൊ ഞാൻ ഒരു കത്തി, ഒരു ആയുധം കൊണ്ട് കാട്ടിൽ കയറുവാണ്. ആയുധം കൊണ്ട് കയറുമ്പോൾ നമ്മൾ ചെല്ലുന്ന കാണുമ്പോൾ തന്നെ മറ്റുള്ള മരങ്ങൾ ഓർക്കും, മനസ്സിലുണ്ടാവും അത് എന്നെ വെട്ടുവോ എന്ന് ഒരു പേടി. മരത്തിനെല്ലാം ഉണ്ടാവും പേടി. അപ്പൊ ആരെയും വെട്ടാതെ പോലെ ആ മരത്തിന് ഭയങ്കര സന്തോഷമായിരിക്കും. നമ്മൾ വെട്ടിയാല് മറ്റുള്ള മരത്തിനെല്ലാം അത് സങ്കടാവും. അങ്ങനെ എനിക്ക് എൻ്റെ മനസ്സിലൊരു തോന്നലാണ്. അങ്ങനെയൊക്കെ തോന്നാറുണ്ട്. പിന്നെ അതുപോലെ തന്നെ കാട്ടിലെ മരങ്ങളെ വള്ളികള് ഒരു രക്ഷയാണ്. വള്ളികൾ ഞാൻ കണ്ടിട്ടുണ്ട്. കാട്ടിലൊരു മരം ഞാൻ മനസ്സിലാക്കിയതാണ്. ഞാൻ ഒരുപാട് കാട്ടിൽ നടന്നിട്ടുള്ള ആളാണ്. ഞാൻ മനസ്സിലാക്കിയ ഒരു മരം ഒറ്റയ്ക്ക് നിൽക്കുന്നു. അത് കുറച്ച് ചെരിഞ്ഞു നിൽക്കുന്നുണ്ട്. പക്ഷെ ആ മരം, അതിലൊരു വള്ളി, കർണക്കൊടി, വള്ളിന്റെ പേര് കർണക്കൊടിയാണ്. ഈ വള്ളി വേറൊരു മരത്തിന്റെ ചുവട്ടിൽ നിന്ന് കയറി ആ മരത്തിലേക്ക് പിടിച്ചിട്ടുണ്ടായിരുന്നു. അപ്പൊ ഞാൻ മനസ്സിൽ ഇങ്ങനെ ഓർത്തു, ആ വള്ളിയാണ് ആ മരത്തിന്റെ രക്ഷകൻ. അപ്പൊ നമുക്കും ഉണ്ടാവും നമ്മൾ രക്ഷിക്കുന്ന ആളുണ്ടാകാം. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ മരത്തിനും രക്ഷകരുണ്ട്. ഞാൻ ഈ വള്ളിയെ ബഹുമാനിച്ചു. നീ കാരണമാണല്ലോ ഈ മരം വീഴാതെ നിൽക്കുന്നത്. മരത്തിനോട് നന്ദി പറഞ്ഞു. അല്ല, വള്ളിയോട് നന്ദി പറഞ്ഞു. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ കുറെ തമാശകൾ കാട്ടിലുണ്ട്. അത് ഇങ്ങനെ പറഞ്ഞാല് മനസ്സിലാവില്ല. നമ്മൾ നേരിട്ട് പോയി കണ്ട് ആ തമാശകൾ നമ്മൾ മനസ്സിലാക്കേണ്ട കാര്യങ്ങൾ കുറെ അധികം തമാശകൾ. അപ്പൊ മരത്തിനെ കുറിച്ച് അത്രയൊക്കെ ഉള്ളൂ. പറയണമെന്നുണ്ട്, കുറെയൊക്കെ ഉണ്ട്, കുറെയൊക്കെ മറന്നു, അതിനൊക്കെ ഓർത്ത് പറയണം.
Saji says, He has been to the forest many times, I mean, like quite a lot. There are lots to talk. Trees, creepers. There are many incredible things. He says funny, incredible things in the forest, and many sad tales too. One sad tale thing, for instance, is that, see, suppose I am going into the forest with a knife. Now all the trees would be scared. If I cut one tree, all the other trees will be sad. That's one thing. I feel that. Then about creepers. There are many, there's an incredible thing that I have noticed. Once, there is a creeper called Karanakudi. And I see one creeper rising from the bottom of one tree and growing towards another tree which is about to fall. And this creeper holds the tree. And I see this. It's incredible how this delicate creeper is holding the tree. I tell the creeper, oh, you protect this tree. You are its savior. So there are many things like that. But it's no use talking about it. You have to be there. You have to be in the presence of these trees and creepers.
Shirley, I think we need to wind up here. Saji, നമുക്ക് സമയം കഴിയാനായി സജി. അവസാനത്തെ എന്തെങ്കിലും 2 വാക്കുണ്ടോ?
ഉണ്ട്. അപ്പൊ എനിക്ക് ലാസ്റ്റ് വാക്കും കാടിനെ കുറിച്ചാണ്. അപ്പൊ നമ്മള് വരുന്ന കുട്ടികള്, പിന്നെ കാട്ടിൽ വരുന്ന കുട്ടികൾ, ഞാൻ പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്ന കുട്ടികള്, എനിക്ക് നന്ദി പറയാനുണ്ട് അങ്ങനെ വരുന്നതില്. കാരണം എന്റെ അറിവ് ഞാൻ ആ കുട്ടിക്ക് പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കുന്നുണ്ടല്ലോ. ആ കുട്ടിക്ക് മനസ്സിൽ, ഞാൻ പറയുന്നതിലെല്ലാം മനസ്സിൽ തട്ടി ആ കുട്ടി ഒരു മരമെങ്കിലും നട്ട് അത് പിന്നെ വലിയ മരങ്ങളായി മാറട്ടെ, ആ കുട്ടിക്ക് പറ്റട്ടെ. അതുപോലെ തന്നെ ആ കുട്ടി വന്ന് എന്നോട് പറയണം, പിന്നെ ഞാനൊരു മരം നട്ടു, അതിപ്പോ വലുതായി എന്ന് ആ കുട്ടി എന്നോട് വന്ന് പറയുമ്പോൾ, അന്ന് ചിലപ്പോൾ ഞാൻ വയസ്സായിട്ടുണ്ടാകും കുറച്ചൊക്കെ, എന്നാലും അന്ന് എനിക്കത് കേൾക്കുമ്പോൾ ഒരു ഭയങ്കര സുഖം ഉണ്ടാവും. അതുപോലെ പിന്നെ കുട്ടികളെ പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്നതിൽ എനിക്ക് ഭയങ്കര സന്തോഷമുണ്ട്. എൻ്റെ അറിവ് ഞാൻ മറ്റൊരു കുട്ടിക്ക് പഠിപ്പിക്കുമ്പോൾ ടീച്ചർക്കൊക്കെ നന്നായിട്ട് മനസ്സിലാകും. ടീച്ചർ കുറെ കുട്ടികളൊക്കെ പഠിപ്പിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളതാണല്ലോ. അപ്പൊ മറ്റൊരു കുട്ടിക്ക് എൻ്റെ അറിവ്, ചെറിയൊരു അറിവ്, എനിക്ക് അത്രയൊന്നും അറിയില്ല, ചെറിയൊരു അറിവ് മറ്റൊരു കുട്ടിക്കും കൂടി പറഞ്ഞു കൊടുക്കുമ്പോൾ എൻ്റെ മനസ്സിൽ പിന്നെ വല്ലാത്തൊരു സുഖം തോന്നാറുണ്ട്. അതെനിക്ക് ഇനിയും മുമ്പോട്ട് കൊണ്ടുപോകണമെന്ന് ആഗ്രഹമുണ്ട്. അത്രയൊക്കെ ഉള്ളൂ. നന്ദിയുണ്ട്.
A few more words, and even the last word is about the forest. The children who come with me to the forest, I'm very thankful to them. At least one of them, they should come and tell me, see, I have planted this tree, it has grown big. By the time I would have grown old, but I would be very happy. I'm so happy to share my knowledge with all these children. It's such a pleasure for me.
ഒറ്റ കാര്യം കൂടി, എത്രയും പെട്ടെന്ന് ഈ കൊറോണ വൈറസ് ഒക്കെ മാറി കുട്ടികളെ ഇങ്ങോട്ട് വരട്ടെ, സ്വാഗതം ചെയ്യുന്നു ഞാൻ. താങ്ക് യു.
One more thing, he's saying, let this coronavirus be, done with as quickly as possible, and let the children come back to the forest. He welcomes the children back to the forest.
Thanks, Saji.
നന്ദി.
Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you.
Bhargavi and Leo, over to you.
Thank you, Suprabha. Thank you, Nikita, Lorenzo, Saji, and Shirley for that beautiful, it felt like we were walking into GBS and getting a tour of that place, walking through those pictures where when each of you were talking was very helpful. It took us to a totally different level, actually. It'll be great if anybody else wants to add something. I see a lot of people who are familiar with GBS. If you want to add something, and then we could also take some questions.
I think you should take questions.
Yeah. I think it'll be great if all three of you can also share I know you mentioned the fact that once the children get back to the city, that disconnect happens, and now you're able to expand the program to longer periods of time. So, is there any way that we can build something like this into the school curriculums? Has there been any effort anywhere? uh, is something I know Bhumi has been trying for a long time, but since Nikita has also spent a year at Bhumi, what are your thoughts on the possibility of building this into our curriculums ever? Because our curriculums are so distant from connecting to nature.
Yeah, I think, having seen it at the sorry, am I on mute? No. Having seen it at the sanctuary already with, a certain set of schools, I think it's very possible, and depending on the interest of the school in actually creating such a curriculum, and really bringing the kids, say, one is to the sanctuary, or to another kind of place, and really come at it year after year, like some of the schools have been coming with us. So I've been around for a few groups of Marudam now, and Shibumi school, and the same group kind of comes, like the first year that I was there, and then the second year and the third. So yeah, I think there is a need for sure, and I think there's an equal possibility to do something like that. So
Thank you.
yeah.
Lorenzo, you want to add?
Yeah. Well, I've seen, for instance, Center for Learning, which I mentioned before in Bangalore. The first school who endorsed our, let's say, education programs at the sanctuary. So they send the children for 1 year, they sent everybody. And then all the years since, they sent at least 2 groups for varying lengths of time. But the last years, they would send them for maybe a month each group. And also in their campus outside, in the rural area outside Bangalore, they've created a wildlife sanctuary. They've created a general studies program where all the students, while they take their exams and so on, their standard exams for up to 12th, they also engage in an environmental project. They have to do it, and a social project. So I think a lot can be done. What I also see, though, is that like all of us, we are under the spell of and the pressure of this kind of mad society, this civilization that wants them to be consumers, to be making money and so on. No? And all the schools are under pressure, a lot from parents, from ourselves, teachers as well. So I think it's, for me, it was kind of an eye-opener to see the work done at the sanctuary, because I saw people who had the courage to really live in a different way, no? Not after money, just getting enough of what was enough to get by, but living, not just talking, not making nature as a project, but just becoming part of it and forming a community with it and living together. I think it's quite, and I've seen it now, although I visited many projects, often the work with nature is with us in mind at the receiving end, at the end, no? What can be beneficial for humankind is either it's our food and the resources we get from it, or even when we want diversities because we don't want the planet to collapse for our own welfare, but to really feel that the plants and animals and so on are your kind of kin, and work with them, and just dedicate your life to care for them. I think it's quite rare. I think it can be done anywhere. It shouldn't be replicate what the sanctuary does, because every situation is different. I think it just requires a kind of mind shift. I think visiting nature and spending time and not believing in this madness that wants to be believed in, I think is maybe a first step. And then maybe we can begin to find what we want to do. And it needs taking risks. No, I saw Wolfgang, who started the sanctuary, maybe he had nothing to lose, but he had nothing really in terms of possessions or whatever. And he went to a place which was degraded. He didn't try to go to a beautiful place. There was a tiny, beautiful patch of forest, but he took on degraded land and made it into a little paradise, no? And whereas I see everybody around us, you see, they want to find the last remaining beautiful spots and buy them and privatize them and do something with it, no, for themselves. And so they diminish them in this way. So I think just to have the courage to say, let's start small and yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Saji, would you like to add something? Shirley, can you please translate?
സജി
ആ
സജിക്ക് എന്തെങ്കിലും കൂടെ പറയാനുണ്ടോ കുട്ടികൾ ഇങ്ങനെ പഠിക്കുന്നതിനെ കുറിച്ച്, ഈ പഠിപ്പ് കുട്ടികളുടെ ജീവിതത്തിന്റെ ഭാഗമാക്കുന്നതിനെ കുറിച്ച്?
കുട്ടികൾ എന്റെ അത്ര അറിവ് അങ്ങനെ വരട്ടെന്ന് ഞാൻ വിചാരിക്കുന്നു. പഠിപ്പിക്കാൻ എനിക്ക് അറിയുന്നതെല്ലാം കുട്ടികളെ പഠിപ്പിക്കാം. വേറെ
അല്ല, എല്ലാ കുട്ടികളും ഇങ്ങനെ എല്ലാ സ്കൂളിലൊക്കെ ഇതൊരു ഭാഗമാക്കുന്നതിനെ കുറിച്ച്.
സ്കൂളിലൊക്കെ ഭാഗമാക്കുന്നത് നല്ലതായിരിക്കും. എനിക്ക് ഹലോ എനിക്ക് കറക്റ്റ് മനസ്സിലായില്ല.
ഇല്ല സജീവനായിട്ട് എന്തെങ്കിലും കൂടി പറയാൻ ആലോചിച്ചിരുന്നു?
എനിക്ക് നമ്മളെ ആചാരങ്ങളെ കുറിച്ച് അത് ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞില്ല.
അത് നമുക്ക് ഇനിയിപ്പോ കുറച്ച് ഉള്ളൂ. ഇല്ല, ഇപ്പൊ വേണ്ട, നമുക്കത് വേറെ ഒരിക്കലാവാം. അത് വളരെ പ്രധാനപ്പെട്ട കാര്യമാണ്, പക്ഷെ വേറെ ഒരിക്കലാവാം. ഇപ്പൊ കാടും കുട്ടികളുടെ വിദ്യാഭ്യാസത്തെ കുറിച്ച് വേറെ എന്തെങ്കിലും? ഇല്ല, ഇല്ലെങ്കിൽ വേണ്ട, എന്തെങ്കിലും കാര്യം തോന്നിയെങ്കിൽ.
അതെ, കുട്ടികളെ വരുന്ന പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്നതിൽ കുട്ടികൾ വന്നാൽ എനിക്ക് കുട്ടികളെ പഠിപ്പിക്കുന്നതിന് നല്ലൊരു ഇതുണ്ട്. അത് ഞാൻ പറഞ്ഞു.
എന്നാ അങ്ങനെ പറയട്ടെ. He says, like he's happy to have children with him and into the forest. He didn't say anything about the rituals of his people, which is quite something, which is part of their education and their like kind of conservation and everything. But that would take such a long time. So that's what he wants to say.
Thank you. There are a couple of comments in the chat box. So Gopal Nigi says, thanks. The passion and emotion with which Saji has carrying while speaking reminds me of Masanabu Fukaka. Then Ravi Manikatu says, thanks Saji for expressing your emotional connection with trees and forests. Communication with trees and between trees is a potential research topic. How can this be documented, integrating art and science? So looking at the time, any final comments from Suprabha or Lorenzo, Nikita, Saji, Shirley, anybody? Then since there are not many questions, I think, just listening to all of you and seeing those beautiful images has taken us to a totally different world, and it requires some amount of processing and taking it in. So, Leo, you have a comment question?
I just, the kind of work that is going on there should inspire a lot of people across the world, because one of the major consequences of how the world is structured is the fact that future generations do not have a connect with nature. More and more we are getting urbanized, and more we are getting distanced. The separation with nature is so striking and fundamental. And like you said, Bhargavi, earlier, that children are literally locked in. And when I heard Lorenzo speak about how children unleashed their energies and their passions to be in the wild, the concept of rewilding humans should not be lost on us, because it's such a stirring concept, because taming humans seems to be the procedure of this civilizational project. And I just read the most disturbing news that in the Arctic, we knew the ice was melting away. But what's now becoming more and more strikingly clear is the methane which was locked in the permafrost is just coming out. So we are really, going to suffer devastating consequences of this buildup. And it's in that sense, I think, I wish this was the infection that we all contracted, Rewilding Humans. Though the COVID pandemic reminds us that we need not have got infected by that virus, and we, managed to use our intelligence far more effectively. So I'm just hoping that this kind of work, as it gets spoken of, gets shared and goes viral in the right sense, so that we just throw those books away, which distance us from what we should do right, which guide us onto literally a wrong path. So hearing all 3-4 of you, I think that's the kind of message I get. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Leo. Suprabha?
So one of the things that is coming to my mind is how very few of the things that we have done with visiting students, children as well as adults, is that we haven't created very specialized activities for them, maybe a little bit, but a lot of what we do is simply to share what we are doing and what we love. So children enter into a place of meaning for the adults. And I think that's quite important, that it's not made into a series of gimmicky activities that you construct for 2, 3, 4, 5 days. It's rather that people come in and join something that is going on, that they contribute to, learn from, learn together with, and then they come back. People come back year after year, or they come back 5 years, 10 years later, and you see how the place is so much more diverse than it was, say, 10 years ago. And this sense of participation, without it becoming too contrived an activity, although, there are nature study projects and so on, but that's already what we are doing as adults. We are engaged in the action of caring, but also of learning. And I think that works well. And that is something that you can just, you can take it with you wherever you go. It's not something to be replicated, but rather just the attitude of learning, listening, observing, coming close to, becoming intimate with, is maybe the message from the place, that what do you need more than your own senses and your body and your imagination and your relationship with the world around. That doesn't need much curriculum or book knowledge. It doesn't need to be transmitted necessarily, but just shared.
Thank you, Suprabha.
This is a question for Lorenzo, right?
Yeah. There's just one question. So Sujata says, over the years, what have you found as the greatest challenge as a teacher?
That's a nice question. Let me try. But I would say myself, first of all. I realize how, I don't know for what reason, our brain seems to be a coping machine, which is very apt at adapting to circumstances, but less apt at questioning things. So I see that, we probably all are aware of, or I don't know whether we are, of the that we are living in a virtual world which we have created with our culture. When I look around myself, I see everything false, really. The roles that people play, the nonsense. We all live in more and more pollution, and nobody likes it, and yet we contribute to a system that creates unhealthy conditions in so many ways. When I see the wars going on and the destruction which is there and the sorrow it creates unnecessarily, well, it's just madness, no? And yet we buy into that, no? The moment we think, I am an Indian, I am a Swiss, this is already an easy example, nationalism or the religion I belong to. These are ideas that we have invented and that we believe in. So that's how our brain works. in my life, I don't know, maybe I've had a few breakthrough insights now and then, but they require such an intensity of attention, of interest from my part, that it has been quite rare in my life. So when I am with children or with people and we are trying to learn together, for me the question is, how can I bring myself, first of all, to perceive in a different ways, not to have different ideas and play around with ideas, but just to stop that movement which is going on of my brain, and just look and listen and be present to what is around and who is around, and so that something new can come in this. No? And it is possible, but it's a bit tough when you're stuck in your ways. So also with children, no, it's not enough to take them out into the forest because they can have a great time and be quite thoughtless, which you want in a way. But how can we as adults or anyone really to bring their mind to pay a different kind of attention, to slow down and start listening in a different way so that they can begin to pick up something new. And this I found is the same whether I'm teaching mathematics, which I do often, or whether I'm out in the forest with the kids, no? How to have a live perception of something different rather than just throwing around words and notions and ideas and values, right? Yeah, I would say that may be the biggest challenge for me.
Thank you, Lorenzo. There's so much truth in everything that you said, and I think it, it just resonates with most of us here, I'm sure. Looking at time, I'm really, really sorry. We have to close it. Otherwise, we could have really taken this conversation for a little longer. But my sincere thanks to all of you for agreeing to be part of this. It has been a wonderful 1.5 hours that we have spent. It has kind of grounded us from the many, many things that we heard over the last 3 months. To start off, our topic was smart cities. So from smart cities to be talking about nature education, it has kind of been wonderful. Um, just to mention some of the other topics we touched upon was we started with smart cities, then spoke about lakes and wetlands, then elephant corridors, then the conflict between man-animal issues, then migrant health, digital commons. Then we also spoke about thermal power plants and how a local community questioned the International Finance Corporation on it. Then we again got back to the topic of digital commons, then spoke about khadi and midwifery, and now to nature education. It has been really wonderful for everybody who joined us on this, because many people have been writing to us saying it has been a great learning opportunity. So on this note, I would like a few words from Joe Attiali, because this is the last of the webinars, and over to Joe.
Thanks, Bhargavi. I join others to kind of extend my thanks also to Suprabha and all of you who are sharing about the Gurukula. It was very inspiring and it's very inviting, and I should make it a point that I come down there and I've managed to kind of come there despite thinking about it a lot of times. So thank you so much for sharing that work. About this series, I mean, through this series of conversations, it was a great effort to bring together different layers of social activism, looking beyond the narrow prism of our own areas of work. Bhargavi just mentioned about the different sessions that we had, a wide range of sessions. During this past 10 sessions, we heard mostly from the second level of leadership from different organizations and sectors, listening and learning from them the nuances of their work. The conversations reconfirmed how important it is for us to look at activism in a larger canvas rather than from our narrow world of activism, and respect the diversity and the connections between each one of them. It reiterated how important it is to ensure that we need to support each other, and the survival and their thriving is as important as our own.
especially at these times when the regime is coming heavily down upon the ones who are refusing to toe their line. We thank every speaker at these sessions for bringing so much of rich knowledge and experience. We also want to thank the participants from far and near who joined us on this online platform to listen and to engage. A special appreciation to Bhargavi, who meticulously planned each sessions, weaved the conversations together, and brought the best out of each speaker. Finally, it was great to kind of collaborate with ESG on this work as well and learn from this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. So a big shout out to all my colleagues, both at CFA and ESG, who made this possible, because they've been constantly taking care of tweeting, writing reports, making sure the videos and the reports are on the website, and making sure all the registrations were, sent at the correct time, and collecting all the emails and all the back end work that took their time. My sincere thanks to all of them. So on behalf of everybody, I would like to thank all of you again, and goodbye. Leo, do you have anything more to add?
You're on mute, Leo.
I was just going to say thanks to Sana, to Ashwin, to Karthik, to Malvika. I don't know how many of our interns, I know Imanshu and several others have been tweeting, and just reading the tweets itself makes me feel like, I can have a huge sense of, I owe a huge sense of gratitude for them to have taken the pains to do this. This is the kind of creation of spaces which makes a lot of sense when our normal interactions are affected. And I'm very, very happy that so many people came together to make such spaces possible. Varun did so much of the coordination of designing the posters and putting it out, and Ashish definitely helped us out in ensuring we don't lose any of these rich conversations. So they're all on our website. So I invite people to go there as and when you have the comfort of time. And please do spread the word and also share these stories. As Bhargavi said earlier, this was meant to inspire change and transformation. And I hope that that will be realized. So thank you all, and thanks to everyone who I have not mentioned by name, who pulled it all together. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Suprabha.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Supi.
Oh, bye.
There we go. The party of GBS has begun again.
Thank you, everyone.
Enjoy. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Many good friends. It's wonderful.
Yes.
Are you switching this off, Leo?
I wanted to hear the laughter, which I did, and I am sure everybody enjoyed it. Bye.